Title: She invited her broke ex-husband to humiliate him, then learned he was the billionaire heir. Vanessa Cross invited her ex-husband to her wedding for one reason. She wanted him to see the life she believed he had failed to give her. The ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel shimmered beneath a ceiling of crystal chandeliers. White roses climbed silver arches. A string quartet played near the dance floor. Waiters moved between tables carrying champagne that cost more per bottle than Ethan Hart used to earn in a week. At the center of it all stood Vanessa. She wore an ivory designer gown, diamonds at her throat, and the confident smile of a woman who believed life had finally proven her right. Beside her stood Grant Holloway, a polished real estate investor whose family name opened doors before he even knocked. Vanessa lifted her glass and glanced toward the entrance. Then her smile sharpened. "He actually came," she whispered. Several guests turned. Ethan Hart stepped through the double doors alone. His suit was simple, dark, and perfectly fitted, but it carried no famous label. No luxury watch flashed at his wrist. No crowd followed him. He entered with the quiet composure of a man who had stopped needing anyone's approval. That was not the entrance Vanessa had imagined. She had expected hesitation, shame, maybe even bitterness. 5 years earlier, she had left him with one sentence he had never forgotten. "I cannot waste the rest of my life waiting for you to become someone." Tonight, she intended to prove that leaving him had been the best decision she had ever made. His place card had been arranged at the table nearest the service doors, far from the investors, politicians, and wealthy families Vanessa considered important. The insult was deliberate. Even the handwritten message on his invitation had been cruel. "Come see the life you could never give me. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from. And if you believe the greatest revenge is becoming someone no one can humiliate again, like the video and subscribe." Now, back to Ethan. He stopped beneath the chandelier and looked across the room. Vanessa expected him to stare at the flowers, the diamonds, and the man standing where he once had. Instead, Ethan reached inside his coat and touched the edge of a sealed envelope. It had arrived at his apartment that morning by private courier. The paper was thick. The wax seal was unfamiliar. The return address belonged to one of the most powerful law firms in Chicago. Inside was a single sentence. "Mr. Ethan Hart, your presence is required tonight regarding the Whitmore estate." He had almost thrown it away. His father had died when Ethan was 19, leaving behind an old watch, a stack of unpaid bills, and a silence that shaped the next 15 years of his life. There had been no estate, no property, no family fortune. At least, that was what Ethan had always believed. He had come to the wedding not because Vanessa wanted him to witness her happiness, but because the attorney's card instructed him to meet someone inside the Westbrook Hotel before midnight. Across the ballroom, Vanessa leaned toward one of her bridesmaids. "Look at him," she said, making no effort to lower her voice. "Still wearing the same kind of suit. Some men never change." The women around her laughed. Ethan heard them. Once, that laughter would have cut deeply. During their marriage, he had worked 2 jobs while trying to build a small logistics company from nothing. He repaired delivery vans himself, slept 4 hours a night, and poured nearly every dollar he earned into rent, bills, and a future he thought they were building together. Vanessa called his work embarrassing. She wanted rooftop dinners, luxury vacations, and photographs beside people whose names appeared in business magazines. Ethan kept promising that the company would grow. Vanessa kept reminding him that promises did not buy penthouses. Then, one rainy evening, she placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table. Grant had already been waiting in the background. Vanessa never admitted it, but Ethan later discovered she had been meeting Grant for months. She told Ethan she was tired of being married to potential. She wanted success she could touch. Ethan signed the papers without begging. That seemed to offend her more than anger would have. Now, 5 years later, she had invited him to watch her marry the man she believed represented everything Ethan had failed to become. A waiter offered Ethan champagne. He declined. Near the far wall stood a silver-haired man in a dark overcoat. He held no drink and spoke to no one. Yet something about his stillness made him more noticeable than the loudest person in the room. When the man's eyes met Ethan's, he gave the smallest nod. Then he walked toward a private corridor. Ethan followed. Behind him, Vanessa laughed. "Careful, Ethan," she called. "The staff rooms are the other way." Several guests turned. Ethan paused, but did not look back. "They are expecting me," he said. The room quieted for half a second. Vanessa's smile tightened. In the private corridor, the silver-haired man waited beside a closed door. "Mr. Hart," he said, "my name is Owen Mercer. I represent the Whitmore estate." Ethan removed the envelope from his coat. "I think there has been a mistake." "There has been a mistake," Owen replied. "But it was made 34 years ago." He opened the door. Inside was a small meeting room with a walnut table, 2 leather chairs, and a folder marked Confidential Succession Review. Owen placed a document in front of Ethan. At the top were 4 words that made Ethan's breathing slow. Preliminary Notice of Heirship. Ethan read the first paragraph twice. The estate belonged to Harold Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Global Holdings, a private industrial empire with interests in shipping, energy, construction, technology, and commercial property. The Whitmore name was known across the country. Harold Whitmore had died 6 weeks earlier. According to the document, Ethan had been named a preliminary heir pending verification of identity and a sealed family connection. "This cannot be real," Ethan said. Owen sat across from him. "Your birth certificate lists Thomas Hart as your father." "He was my father. He raised you," Owen said carefully. "But he was not your biological father." The words landed without drama. That made them heavier. Owen opened a second folder. Inside were hospital records, private letters, photographs, and an amended trust signed more than 3 decades earlier. One photograph showed Ethan's mother as a young woman standing beside a man Ethan recognized from newspaper archives. Alexander Whitmore, Harold Whitmore's only son. Alexander had died in a plane crash before Ethan was born. Ethan stared at the photograph. "My mother never told me. She was paid not to." The room seemed to shrink. Owen explained that the Whitmore family had opposed Alexander's relationship with Ethan's mother. After Alexander's death, certain members of the family arranged a private agreement. Ethan's mother received money and legal protection in exchange for raising her child outside the Whitmore name. But Alexander had created a sealed trust before his death. If his child could ever be identified, that child would inherit Alexander's controlling shares after Harold Whitmore's death. Ethan looked down at the documents. "How much are those shares worth?" Owen did not answer immediately. Instead, he slid a valuation report across the table. Ethan read the number once. Then again, $12.8 billion. His fingers went still. Owen's voice remained calm. "If the verification is completed, you will not simply inherit wealth. You will become the controlling shareholder of Whitmore Global Holdings." Ethan leaned back. For years, Vanessa had mocked him for owning a struggling logistics company with 3 vans and a rented warehouse. Now a legal document claimed he controlled one of the largest private transportation and infrastructure networks in the country. Through the wall, the music from the wedding swelled. Owen looked toward the ballroom. "There is another complication." Ethan closed the valuation report. "What kind?" "Grant Holloway's development firm is seeking emergency financing from Whitmore Capital." Ethan said nothing. Owen continued. "His company has overextended itself. 3 projects are behind schedule. 2 lenders have already refused to refinance his debt. Without Whitmore Capital's approval, his firm may not survive the quarter." The irony was so precise that Ethan almost laughed. Vanessa had left him because she believed Grant represented financial security. Now Grant's future depended on a company Ethan might control before the night ended. "Does Grant know?" Ethan asked. "No." "Does Vanessa?" "No." Owen gathered the documents. "The trustee is waiting in the hotel's executive suite. We can complete the first stage of verification tonight." Ethan stood. Then the ballroom doors opened. Vanessa appeared in the corridor. For 1 second, surprise crossed her face. Then she looked at Owen, the legal folders, and the private room. Her expression changed into suspicion. "What is this?" she asked. Owen turned politely. "A confidential matter." Vanessa ignored him. She looked at Ethan. "Are you causing trouble at my wedding?" Ethan almost smiled. Even now, she could only imagine him as the problem. "No," he said. "I was invited." "By whom?" "That does not concern you." Vanessa gave a quiet, dismissive laugh. "You always did love pretending something important was about to happen." Ethan's face remained calm. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Do not embarrass yourself tonight. Grant has business partners here. His family is here. People who matter are here." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "That was always your mistake, Vanessa." Her eyes narrowed. "What was?" "You decided who mattered by looking at what they owned." The word struck harder than he intended. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Before she could reply, Grant entered the corridor. He looked annoyed. Vanessa, people are waiting for the first dance. Then he noticed Owen. Recognition flashed across his face. Mr. Mercer? Owen nodded. Mr. Holloway. Grant's posture changed immediately. He knew exactly who Owen was. Owen Mercer was not merely an estate attorney. He was also senior counsel to Whitmore Capital, the institution Grant had been trying to reach for months. Grant forced a smile. I did not realize Whitmore had representatives here tonight. We have business at the hotel, Owen said. Grant looked at Ethan. With him, Owen did not answer. That silence unsettled Grant more than any explanation could have. Vanessa crossed her arms. Ethan probably exaggerated something. He has always had a talent for making small things sound important. Owen's expression cooled. Mr. Hart has made no claims. Grant studied Ethan more carefully. For the first time that evening, he seemed unsure of where Ethan belonged. Owen turned to Ethan. The trustee is ready. Vanessa laughed again, but this time the sound lacked confidence. Ready for what? Ethan looked at her. For something you would never have waited long enough to understand. Then he walked away with Owen. The executive suite occupied the highest floor of the hotel. Inside, 3 people waited around a long table. The Whitmore family trustee, a forensic genealogist, and a retired judge appointed to oversee the succession process. The verification lasted nearly 2 hours. They compared hospital records, blood samples, letters, photographs, and the private trust Alexander Whitmore had signed before his death. Ethan answered questions about his mother, his childhood, and the man who had raised him. The retired judge finally removed his glasses. Mr. Hart, the documentary evidence is unusually strong. Final DNA confirmation will be completed tomorrow morning, but there is enough evidence to activate the temporary succession clause tonight. The trustee opened a leather case. Inside lay a sealed certificate. Until final confirmation, she said, you are recognized as acting beneficiary and temporary voting controller of Alexander Whitmore's shares. Ethan stared at the certificate. The trustee continued. As of this moment, no major financing decision involving Whitmore Capital can proceed without your approval. Grant Holloway's name sat on the top file beside her hand. Ethan saw it immediately. The trustee noticed. Holloway Urban Development has requested a $200 million rescue package. Ethan opened the file. The numbers were worse than Owen had suggested. Grant had hidden losses, borrowed against unfinished properties, and moved funds between projects to delay default. The company was not merely struggling. It was collapsing. Ethan closed the file. Was this application recommended for approval? The trustee shook her head. No. But Mr. Holloway has been using his family connections to pressure the board. Then deny it. The room went quiet. The trustee studied him. Are you certain? Ethan looked at Grant's financial statements. He did not think of revenge. He thought of employees, contractors, unpaid suppliers, and families whose livelihoods were tied to a man who had gambled with money that was not his. Deny the rescue package, Ethan said, but create a protected fund for unpaid workers and small contractors. They should not lose everything because he was reckless. The trustee gave a small nod. That can be arranged. Ethan signed the temporary authorization. At the exact moment his pen left the page, the wedding music below shifted into a louder, brighter song. Vanessa's first dance had begun. By the time Ethan returned to the ballroom, nearly every guest was watching Grant and Vanessa move beneath the chandeliers. Vanessa saw Ethan immediately. She smiled as though nothing had changed. Then Grant's phone vibrated. He ignored it. It vibrated again and again. Finally, he stepped away from the dance floor. Vanessa looked embarrassed. Grant. He glanced at the screen. The color left his face. The message was brief. Whitmore Capital has declined your financing request. Immediate review of outstanding obligations will begin Monday. Grant read it twice. Then he looked across the room at Owen. Owen stood beside Ethan. The connection formed slowly. Grant walked toward them. What did you do? He demanded. Several nearby conversations stopped. Owen answered first. Your application was reviewed and denied. By whom? Owen looked at Ethan. Grant followed his gaze. For a moment, nobody spoke. Vanessa approached, lifting the front of her gown. What is happening? Grant pointed at Ethan. He had something to do with this. Vanessa stared at her ex-husband. Then she laughed. It was too loud. That is impossible. Owen reached inside his jacket and removed a formal document. Mr. Ethan Hart has been recognized as the temporary voting controller of the Alexander Whitmore Trust. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Grant looked as though the floor had moved beneath him. One of the guests whispered, "Whitmore?" Another said, "As in Whitmore Global?" Owen continued, "Pending final confirmation tomorrow, Mr. Hart is the controlling heir to the Whitmore estate." The room fell silent. Vanessa looked at Ethan, then at Owen, then back at Ethan. Her eyes searched his face for the joke. There was none. "How much?" someone whispered. Grant knew the answer. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Owen did not state the amount. He did not need to. The Whitmore name was enough. The guests who had ignored Ethan when he entered now stared at him with open fascination. Investors began whispering. Phones appeared discreetly beneath tables. Vanessa's bridesmaids stopped smiling. Vanessa took one step toward Ethan. "You knew?" "No." "When did you find out?" "Tonight." Her gaze dropped to his suit. The same suit she had mocked less than 3 hours earlier. "You are saying you are—" She could not finish the sentence. Ethan finished it for her. "The same man you invited here to humiliate." Vanessa's face flushed. "That is not why I invited you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. The handwritten message on the invitation sat safely inside his coat. "Come see the life you could never give me." Vanessa lowered her voice. "We were married. I wanted closure." "No," Ethan said. "You wanted an audience." The words moved through the room like a cold wind. Grant stepped between them. "This is absurd. Temporary control means nothing. The financing decision can be reconsidered." Ethan looked at him. "It will be reconsidered when your company provides honest records, protects its workers, and stops asking other people to fund your mistakes." Grant's jaw tightened. "You think inheriting money makes you a businessman?" Ethan's expression did not change. "No. Building a company when everyone expects you to fail made me a businessman." A few guests looked away. They remembered laughing earlier. Grant took another step forward, but Owen quietly moved between them. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "I strongly recommend that you do not create another problem tonight." Vanessa touched Grant's arm. He pulled away. For the first time, she saw panic in the man she had chosen because he seemed untouchable. "Grant," she whispered, "what does this mean?" He looked at her with anger he could no longer hide. "It means the company may be finished." The diamonds at Vanessa's throat suddenly looked heavier. Guests began leaving the dance floor. The celebration did not end at once. It faded. Conversations became cautious. Business partners stopped approaching Grant. 2 investors left without saying goodbye. Vanessa stood beneath the white roses while the perfect wedding she had designed began to collapse around her. Ethan turned to leave. "Wait," she said. He stopped. Her voice softened. "Can we talk privately?" Grant stared at her. "Vanessa." She ignored him. "Please, Ethan." 5 years earlier, Ethan would have followed her anywhere for that tone. Now, it sounded like a key being tried in a lock that had already been changed. They stepped onto a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cold. Below them, headlights moved through the streets like rivers of gold. Vanessa closed the door behind them. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she looked at him with an expression Ethan had once prayed to see. "Regret." "I did not know," she said. "That was never the problem." Her eyes filled with frustration. "You kept everything from me." "I did not know either. But your company, your plans, maybe I should have believed in you more." Ethan looked out over the city. "You did believe in me once." Vanessa swallowed. When you thought I would become successful quickly." The answer cut through her excuses. Ethan continued. "You did not stop believing because I changed. You stopped because success took longer than your patience." Vanessa wrapped her arms around herself. "I was young. So was I. I was scared. So was I. I wanted a better life. So did I. I thought we were building it together." Vanessa looked down. For the first time that night, she seemed small. Not because she lacked money or beauty, but because the story she had told herself for years was falling apart. She had said Ethan lacked ambition, but he had kept working after she left. She had said he would never become anyone, but he had built his logistics company to 26 trucks, 3 warehouses, and more than 100 employees before inheritance ever entered his life. She had said Grant was security. Now Grant's empire was collapsing under hidden debt, and Ethan, the man she had seated near the service doors, controlled the one institution that could have saved him. Vanessa stepped closer. "Is there any chance we could start again?" Ethan looked at her. She tried to hold his gaze. I made mistakes, she said. Terrible mistakes. But we had something real once. We did. Then maybe it is not too late. Ethan was quiet. The hope in her face grew. Then he said, You do not miss me, Vanessa. Her lips parted. You miss the version of me you can finally respect. That is not fair. It is exactly fair. She blinked back tears. I loved you. You loved what you thought I might become. When becoming it required sacrifice, you chose someone who looked finished. Vanessa looked through the glass doors at Grant. He stood alone near the dance floor, shouting into his phone while guests avoided him. Her wedding dress caught the light. For a moment, she looked like a woman trapped inside a photograph of the life she no longer wanted. Ethan reached for the door. Vanessa caught his sleeve. Please. He looked down at her hand. She released him. I am sorry, she whispered. Ethan believed her. But forgiveness did not require return. I hope one day you become sorry for what you did, he said, not only for what it cost you. Then he went inside. The next morning, the DNA results arrived. The probability of biological relationship exceeded 99.99%. Ethan Hart was legally confirmed as Alexander Whitmore's son and Harold Whitmore's grandson. By noon, the Whitmore board gathered in Boston. Ethan entered the headquarters through a private lobby lined with portraits of men whose blood ran through his veins, but whose world had never included him. Owen walked beside him. Reporters crowded the street outside. The story had already leaked. Unknown Whitmore heir emerges at society wedding. Broke ex-husband revealed as billionaire successor. But Ethan barely looked at the headlines. Inside the boardroom, 12 directors waited around a table long enough to make power feel like architecture. Some looked curious. Some looked worried. A few looked offended that a man raised outside their world had arrived with controlling shares. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Hart, this transition will be complex. Ethan took the empty seat at the head of the table. My life has been complex, he said. This is paperwork. Owen almost smiled. Over the next several weeks, Ethan learned the truth about the family that had hidden him. Harold Whitmore had discovered the sealed trust only months before his death. By then, his health was failing. He ordered Owen to find Alexander's child and restore what had been taken. The person who concealed Ethan's identity had been Harold's late wife, Margaret Whitmore. She had feared scandal, inheritance disputes, and the possibility that Ethan's mother would gain influence over the company. She paid for silence, altered private records, and made sure the child grew up far from the Whitmore name. But Alexander's trust had survived. Truth had waited longer than power. Ethan did not enter the company like a man collecting revenge. He entered like the owner of responsibility. He sold 2 private jets, canceled a wasteful executive retreat, and redirected millions into employee pensions and small business supplier funds. He ordered independent audits. He removed 3 directors who had approved corrupt contracts. Then he merged his own logistics company into Whitmore Global under one condition. Every employee kept a job. The warehouse workers who had believed in him when he owned 3 broken vans now received company shares. The business world called his decisions bold. His employees called them decent. Grant Holloway's company filed for bankruptcy 6 weeks after the wedding. Investigators discovered hidden liabilities and false financial reports. Several projects were transferred to new management. The workers and small contractors were paid from the protected fund Ethan had ordered on his first night as acting heir. Grant blamed everyone except himself. Vanessa filed for an annulment before the 2nd month of marriage had ended. The newspapers followed her everywhere. For years, she had wanted to be photographed beside wealth. Now every photograph reminded the public that she had mocked a billionaire before anyone knew he was one. But the headlines were not what hurt most. What hurt was watching Ethan become the man he had always been becoming. He did not suddenly become disciplined because he inherited money. He had been disciplined when he repaired engines at midnight. He did not suddenly become generous because he controlled billions. He had been generous when he gave his last savings to keep his employees paid. He did not suddenly become worthy because a DNA test connected him to a famous family. He had been worthy when no one important knew his name. 3 months after the wedding, Vanessa requested a meeting. Ethan declined. She sent a letter. He did not open it for 2 weeks. When he finally did, the words were simple. I thought I left because you had no future. The truth is, I left because I did not have the courage to build one with you. I confused wealth with character, attention with love, and impatience with ambition. I know saying sorry changes nothing, but I am sorry. Ethan folded the letter. Then he placed it in a drawer. Not because it meant nothing, because it no longer controlled anything. A year later, Whitmore Global held its annual employee summit in the same Westbrook hotel where Vanessa had tried to humiliate him. This time, Ethan stood beneath the chandeliers. But there were no white roses arranged to impress investors. The ballroom was filled with warehouse teams, engineers, drivers, office staff, and small suppliers whose businesses had survived because someone in power remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. On the stage behind him appeared photographs of the company's new worker housing program, scholarship fund, and debt-free training centers. Ethan stepped to the microphone. When people see success, he began, they often imagine a single moment when everything changed. The room grew quiet. But most lives do not change in one moment. They change in years no one applauds, in rooms no one sees, through work no one respects until the result becomes impossible to ignore. Near the back of the ballroom, Owen listened with folded arms. Ethan continued, "There was a time when I believed being underestimated was a punishment. Now I understand it was training. It taught me how to work without praise, how to lead without applause, and how to recognize people the world has placed near the service doors." A few employees smiled. Some knew the story. "Never let someone else's impatience become your identity," Ethan said. "And never confuse being unseen with being worthless. A seed does not become less alive because no one can see what is happening beneath the ground." The audience rose. The applause filled the ballroom. Outside the hotel, rain began to fall softly over the city. Ethan left the stage and walked toward the same corridor where Owen had first told him that a mistake had been made 34 years earlier. At the window, he paused. For years, he had imagined success as the moment Vanessa would finally regret leaving him. But standing there, he realized her regret was the least important part of his story. He had not won because she wanted him back. He had won because he no longer needed her to. Vanessa had once asked him to become someone. She never understood that he already was someone. The money only made it impossible for her to keep pretending otherwise. And that was the truth she would have to live with. Ethan did not return to the woman who had mocked him. He did not use his wealth to destroy her. He did something far more powerful. He built a life so honest, so meaningful, and so complete that her rejection became nothing more than the door he had once needed to walk through. She lost a husband because she could not see beyond his empty pockets. Then she watched the world discover what had been inside him all along. A billionaire inheritance changed Ethan's name in the headlines. But it was everything he survived before the inheritance that made him a man worthy of carrying it.